Has anyone ever really wanted a Niall video? Has anyone even thought we got enough information on Niall for me to extend something to 10 minutes in the first place? I don't know. And, well, if you did want a Niall video, then I don't know if this is exactly what you want, because this is more of a Niall-adjacent video. It's revolving around him, but it's not really about him and his character. It's the fact that he should probably watch his back. Now, I know Emperor isn't exactly the most stable job in history in general, but because of certain circumstances, I think he's got a lot of stuff to watch out for. This will involve spoilers for all of Xenoblade 2. Niall himself is almost never really directly focused on, so it is pretty easy to just not really think about him and almost feel like he's the kind of character who's just mentioned but never really seen or shown their personality, and I'd say that Hugo is a much more memorable character in general than he is. But the fact remains, he is well liked by his people, so in terms of that, we're not really likely to see a peasant revolt involving the overthrow of the empire and installation of a democracy, but when it comes to the rest of the government of Mor Ardain, that's where we start running into a few issues. The governmental structure of the country isn't really explored beyond how inheritance works, where males only, females only if there aren't any guys. We know that much, but beyond that, there's almost nothing about how the government works outside of the imperial throne thing. It is clear, though, that the Emperor doesn't have absolute power over everything in all situations. We know as a fact that there is a Senate capable of voting, and then that Dougal, who was in charge of Gormott, had the rank of consul. But that really is about it. And it complicates things because there really is a bit of a cultural hodgepodge going around, especially in the dub version, where we've got an empire where the people have Scottish accents, the aesthetic is sort of steampunk imperial German, the titles everyone has is directly taken from Rome, and what they're doing to Gormott is fairly analogous to the plantations in Ireland from the United Kingdom, so I don't really know. Niall can sort of go around what the Senate wants in some cases, so it might be something more like the US, but with a hereditary lifetime leader instead of an elected president, and then there's a Senate, and the leader has some sort of power of veto over them and has an influence over what they do. Or it could be a constitutional monarchy where the ruler is kept in check by the Senate. From what we can tell, the senators are mostly either nobles or aristocrats of some sort, so they could be hereditary too. It could also be yeah, they're elected, but only the rich people or the nobles can vote, that kind of thing. So, we don't really know, but my guess would be that other people in power are the ones who are most likely to be able to influence the decisions of the Emperor. Anyway, no matter how it's really organized, there are a lot of reasons that the Senate, if not anyone else in the Empire besides the two extremist terrorist organizations, would want Niall dead. And I promise to not make any prequel jokes in the entire rest of the video. First off, he is way too old for them to completely control anymore. It's very likely that if there was ever a time when the previous Emperor had died and Niall wasn't officially old enough to rule in his own name, there would probably have been a regency in charge of things, and that would most likely have been backed by the Senate and comprised of a small committee of the senior senators, probably ones who all had very similar interests, and in the time they had to do that, would probably steer the direction of Mor Ardain as far as they could into what they wanted, and then also try to sow seeds in Niall's head to, hey, listen to us once you grow up. We know how to steer you in the right way. We're good at this kind of stuff, because that kind of thing. Now, the age cutoff for this probably wouldn't be 18 years old. We don't know Niall's age. We know that Hugo, who looked exactly like him, was probably at least 18, and that Rex is 15, and Niall and Rex seem about the same age. So, I'm going to say Niall is definitely under 20, and definitely at least 15. Don't know beyond that, but that doesn't mean that he's not officially an adult. From what I could tell, in medieval times, 14 to 16 was a pretty common time period for the regency to end and a child to become the official ruler in their own right. Obviously, they'd probably still rely a ton on advisors and probably whoever was ruling in their stead for assistance and that kind of thing, but at that point, they would not be beholden to do exactly what they say. So, say the cutoff is 14 and Niall is 15 or 16, about the same age as Rex, he'd have only a couple years of doing it, but he would be in charge of the Empire on his own, not directly underneath whatever senators were in charge before. Of course, depending on how good they are at being disingenuous to a young boy, the Senate would probably still be able to manipulate him into doing certain things they wanted for a while, but the older he gets, the less likely he is to even fall for that kind of thing, so they're definitely on a limited time, and wouldn't it be really convenient if he would just die and end the Imperial line of succession? Obviously, Morag can't become Empress now. She had a chance, but she's not the last one in line anymore, and she's a woman, and also she's older and not very likely to obey them, especially after all the stuff she's seen that Niall hasn't, being the one who does his dirty work. Yeah. So, not only is Niall legally in power to do stuff himself now, but he's also more than old enough to think for himself and realize, hey, maybe these senators don't have the best interest of Mor Ardain in mind, and he might even disagree with the old people telling him what to do. The big disagreement that he would have is Niall wants peace. There's a massive pro-war faction in the Ardanian Senate that obviously is at odds with what he believes. The entire reason that whole Temperantia conflict, which was definitely not a turning point in the game at all, that started because one rogue member of the Senate who was pro-war basically screwed up and tried to start things. Now, that guy, Roderick, was actually almost a moderate, all things considered, because he still wasn't willing to start war unless Niall explicitly approved that action. So, yeah. What was his reasoning for going against the orders, though? It was because he didn't think Niall was able to fully understand the situation Mor Ardain was in, probably because he was young. And keep in mind, this is the kind of guy who will try to do something Niall doesn't want to do, but do it by the book, by the, I will get Niall to agree with my viewpoint and approve the war thing instead of, I'm just going to start a war without him. And there are definitely people who are more extreme than him who would definitely start a war without Niall. Apparently, this Warhawk faction in the Senate is even supporting the Briannac terrorist organization, which is trying to topple Niall's rule. We don't really know about Lindworm. It's even possible that there are two groups in the Senate, maybe one more moderate one like Roderick, who's just trying to instill fear and get Niall to up the military operations just to protect himself, and then another that's just trying to kill him. But either way, the fact that the militant terrorist group that's trying to topple the Emperor is doing it because he's not starting enough international conflict, that's probably a bit of a red flag. Niall is also getting what to these people is probably uncomfortably close to Oriah. The entire thing that happened at the big summit, Niall was nearly alone with the Queen of Oriah, and nearly died, and yet he still wants things to go as peacefully as possible, despite the fact that her security wasn't able to protect him from an attack. He almost died, and who knows what could have happened if the Queen of Oriah and a very small amount of other people were the only people who bore witness to the death of the Emperor of Mor Ardain. Something tells me that, mysteriously, Niall's will, instead of giving Morag the throne or whatever, would have given the entire control of the Empire to Oriah. Just saying. Rakora seems like a decent person at least, but if given that opportunity, would she really not take it? The whole jumping out to protect her thing did seemingly raise her suspicions of him, since she was unable to tell if him doing that was just genuinely him being impulsive and trying to help, or if it was some kind of elaborate political stunt where he accidentally got himself killed and then everything was okay because Nia. So, yeah, we don't really know exactly what was going on in her mind after that, since she completely goes out of focus besides a couple side quests later on. But she either became really suspicious of the Empire after that, which is not good if you're trying to spring a war on them, or too trusting, which is also not good if you plan on stabbing them in the back. the Senate could probably very easily claim that doing those actions proved that he was acting against the interest of the Empire, or he was mentally compromised, not fit to rule in some way, or just he trusts the foreign rulers too much. He's willing to give his life for the Queen of Araya, but is he willing to give his life for the people of Mor Ardain? Probably not. He's the treason one there. He doesn't have a Geon anymore. We don't know exactly how things work, but 500 years ago, Hugo's brother was unable to become emperor because he couldn't be a driver. So maybe they could claim Niall is illegitimate because he doesn't have a blade anymore. If he's not a driver, he can't be emperor, so get him out of there. Morag? Well, again, women bad, and she's not in the direct line of succession anymore, so, well, guess we're gonna put in another regency until Niall has a kid who is a driver and is old enough. Look at that. And then to end things off, we've got the whole situation with the state of the world after the end of the game. We don't really know what happened to the nations and how they operate after the story ended and the Titans all went to the same dry land, but they probably are still some sort of authority, since the Titans weren't all piled on top of each other really, and most likely you're going to be more closer to other settlements from your same Titan you came from as from people from another Titan, so the nation still would make sense geographically, and with Indal out of the way, there aren't really any major world authority forces, so it would probably go down to the nation level, and the nations would still largely be in charge of things. Just because there is now enough land to go around doesn't mean people will stop trying to take control of it and exploit it for personal gain. So it's not like the Senate doesn't have a reason to still want to go to war. Plus, if Araya is still there, they'll feel like, oh, the rivalry still needs to be fulfilled. We have the resources to do a real war now. Let's fight with no holds barred. Welcome to the new world. Everyone's time to die. Wahoo. When the world is in this much disarray, this is probably the best possible time to make a power play. Like, stability in terms of everyone having enough room and food to eat, that's probably going to be okay now, but stability in terms of nations staying together and regimes not getting toppled, that might take a few decades. If there's ever a post-game story for Xenoblade 2 to be the Perfect Works Episode 6 to the main game's Episode 5 and Torna's Episode 4, I could see it being about this in some way. The big supernatural existential threats to the world are gone, but now it's time to deal with politics and prevent people in power from taking advantage of the massive shakeup in world order to get themselves even more power and put themselves in a bigger position over everyone else. Morag might be a focal character of this, since she's the closest to any of the active rulers, because Zeke and his father are still sort of estranged, and the plot could revolve around trying to stop various conspiracies and assassins from corrupt senators who are trying to take Niall out and use Mor Ardain's military might to seize control of as much of the new world as possible. There is actually something almost resembling precedent for this. One of the characters in Xenogears is the heir to an empire, but like Xenoblade 2, the game almost completely drops the politics about halfway through, so this is never really followed up on, and the character, I don't think, actually finds this out himself at all. So it is very possible that if Episode 6 was to follow fairly close after Episode 5, which was Xenogears, that whole plot thread and other unresolved plot points from the first game would be the focus. Either way, while the danger level for a general citizen of Alrus has probably gone down tremendously once Malos was defeated, Niall's real trial has only just begun, as he now has to help build a brand new world, while also dodging a bunch of assassination attempts from people who never really liked him to begin with, and are even less happy with him because he's being benevolent even now. I do feel bad for Niall for being in this situation, but I would very much like this idea for a follow-up game to 2, because that would mean that there's a chance for a reformed Captain Padraig to become a party member working under Morag, and let's be real, who wouldn't want that? I very much would want to see what Padraig looks like under the helmet at the very least, so I don't know, maybe we'll get Xenoblade 2 Art Book 2. Maybe those portals in Future Connected are actually teleporting underneath Padraig's helmet. I don't know. I'm sure he looks wonderful. And yeah, that's all I got. Goodbye.